the Sophia Shift. Almost no empath talks about it because almost no empath survives it. At first, being an empath feels like a gift. You understand people. You feel deeply. You care more than most. But Carl Jung warned that until you face your shadow, your gifts can control you. And that's where everything changes. The Sophia Shift is the moment an empath stops being emotionally available to everyone and starts being psychologically aware of everything. They still feel, but they no longer chase. They still care, but they no longer rescue. They can sense manipulation in seconds, and they don't argue with it. They simply step back. This is the stage where empathy becomes power. Not loud power, not cruel power, quiet, controlled power. And here's the truth, most empaths never reach it because it requires losing the version of yourself that needed to be needed. So how do you know if you're awakening or still trapped in emotional survival mode? Stay with me until the end, because the final sign might change how you see yourself. And if this speaks to something you've been feeling but couldn't explain, subscribe and comment, shift below. The illusion of the kind empath is where the story truly begins, because most empaths grow up being praised for the very behavior that slowly disconnects them from themselves. They are called selfless, patient, understanding, mature beyond their years. They are the ones who calm arguments, who listen for hours, who forgive even when no real apology is given. From the outside, this looks like strength. It looks like emotional intelligence. It looks like kindness in its purest form. But Carl Jung warned about something subtle and dangerous, the persona. The persona is the mask we create to survive, to be accepted, to feel valued. And when a person over-identifies with that mask, they forget who they are underneath it. Many empaths are not consciously pretending, but they are unconsciously performing. They become attached to being the good one, the understanding one, the bigger person. Over time, this identity becomes rigid. They don't allow themselves to feel anger without guilt. They don't express disappointment without apologizing for it. They don't set boundaries without over-explaining them. What looks like compassion is often fear, fear of rejection, fear of abandonment, fear of being seen as difficult. And this is where the illusion begins to crack, because true compassion does not require self-erasure. Yet many empaths confuse goodness with self-abandonment. They believe that to be loving means to tolerate everything. They think patience means staying silent when something feels wrong. They believe forgiveness must be immediate, even when trust has been broken. Jung would say that this happens when a person has not integrated their shadow. The shadow contains the parts of us we were taught were unacceptable: anger, assertiveness, selfishness, even the desire to say no. When an empath rejects these traits, they push them into the unconscious. But rejected emotions do not disappear. They turn into resentment, exhaustion, and quiet bitterness. That is why so many kind empaths feel drained. They are not tired from loving too much. They are tired from pretending they never feel anger. They are exhausted from managing other people's emotions while suppressing their own. They call it empathy, but often it is hyper-vigilance, constantly scanning for shifts in tone, mood, and approval. They anticipate conflict before it happens, and they sacrifice their needs to prevent it. The world rewards this behavior at first. People admire how calm they are. Friends rely on them. Partners lean on them. Family members expect them to understand. But slowly, something inside begins to feel invisible. The empath notices that they are always adjusting, always accommodating, always softening themselves to make others comfortable. They realize that they are loved for how useful they are, not for how honest they are. And this realization is uncomfortable. It threatens the persona they built for survival. If they are not the endlessly kind one, then who are they? If they speak directly, will they lose connection? If they stop over-giving, will anyone stay? These questions mark the beginning of the Sophia Shift. The Sophia Shift begins when the empath dares to question their own niceness. Not their heart, not their values, but the automatic performance of goodness. They begin to notice how often they say yes when they mean no. They observe how quickly they justify someone else's bad behavior. They feel the tension between what they truly think and what they actually say. This awareness is unsettling because it reveals that some of their kindness was driven by fear, and facing that truth requires courage. It requires admitting that being the good one was a strategy, not just a personality. Jung believed individuation, becoming whole, demands that we confront the parts of ourselves we disowned. For the empath, this means accepting that they can feel anger without becoming cruel. They can say no without becoming selfish. They can disappoint others without losing their worth. This shift does not make them cold, it makes them real. They start pausing before automatically agreeing. They allow silence instead of rushing to smooth things over. They stop explaining their boundaries as if they are asking for permission. And something surprising happens. Some people pull away. The ones who benefited from their self-abandonment feel uncomfortable. They may say, "You've changed," and they are right. The empath has changed, not into someone harsh, but into someone integrated. The illusion of the endlessly kind empath begins to dissolve, revealing a more balanced person underneath, someone who can hold compassion and strength at the same time. This is the crucial turning point, because the most dangerous empath is not the one who feels the most. It is the one who has stopped betraying themselves in the name of being good. And that transformation begins the moment they question the mask they once thought was their identity. The breaking point rarely looks dramatic from the outside, but inside the empath, it feels like something has finally snapped. For years they have carried other people's emotions as if it were their responsibility. They have listened, absorbed, forgiven, adjusted, and endured. They told themselves this is just who they are, sensitive, understanding, strong enough to handle more than most. But the shift into the Sophia stage does not begin softly. It does not arrive as a peaceful realization during a calm moment. It usually begins with betrayal, burnout, or a deep emotional exhaustion that cannot be ignored anymore. Maybe it is the friend they defended who turns against them. Maybe it is the partner they supported who takes their loyalty for granted. Maybe it is the sudden awareness that no one ever asks how they are really doing. Whatever the trigger, it hits differently this time. It is not just pain, it is clarity. At first, the empath tries to respond the old way. They try to understand, they try to excuse, they try to see the other person's wounds and justify the behavior. But something inside resists. They feel tired in a way that sleep cannot fix. They feel drained in a way that distance cannot immediately repair. And in that exhaustion, a quiet but powerful thought begins to surface. I keep attracting the same people. That sentence changes everything, because it shifts the focus from blame to pattern. The empath starts to notice that the faces are different, but the dynamic is the same. They are always the listener, never the one being heard. Always the giver, rarely the one receiving. Always the stable one, even when they are breaking inside. This is not bad luck. This is an unconscious pattern repeating itself. Carl Jung spoke about unconscious patterns as forces that guide our lives until we make them conscious. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. The breaking point is the moment when fate no longer feels random. The empath begins to see their own role in the cycle, not as a victim to blame, but as a participant who never questioned why they tolerated so much. They realized their sensitivity was not the problem. The problem was the lack of boundaries around it. Their empathy became an open door, and not everyone who walked through deserved access. This realization can feel uncomfortable, even shameful at first. It is easier to say, "People always hurt me," than to ask, "Why do I keep allowing this?" But awakening demands honesty. Burnout plays a powerful role in this shift. Emotional burnout is not just being tired of people, it is being tired of abandoning yourself. It is the weight of unspoken resentment, the buildup of small compromises that slowly erased personal truth. The empath reaches a point where they cannot perform kindness anymore. They cannot smile through disappointment. They cannot pretend they are fine when they are not. The mask begins to feel heavy, and when the persona cracks, the shadow rises, anger surfaces, frustration becomes visible. There may even be guilt for feeling this way. But this anger is not destructive, it is informative. It signals that something has been violated for too long. This is the collapse of unconscious patterns. The empath begins to trace their behavior back to its roots. Maybe they learned early that love had to be earned. Maybe peace in the household depended on them being the calm one. Maybe they were praised for being mature and selfless, so they built their identity around that role. These survival strategies worked once. They kept relationships stable. They kept approval intact. But what once protected them now limits them. And the breaking point forces a decision: continue repeating the pattern or confront it. Pain, in this stage, becomes a doorway. Jung called this individuation, the process of becoming whole. Individuation does not happen when life is comfortable. It happens when illusions collapse. When the empath sees clearly that their endless giving did not guarantee safety. When they understand that avoiding conflict did not prevent abandonment. When they finally accept that being needed is not the same as being valued. This awareness hurts, but it also frees, because once the pattern is conscious, it can be changed. The sensitivity that once felt like a burden begins to transform. Instead of scanning for how to please others, the empath starts scanning for how they feel. Instead of absorbing every emotional wave, they pause and ask, is this mine to carry? Instead of automatically forgiving, they evaluate whether trust is still intact. This is not bitterness, it is discernment. The breaking point is not the end of empathy, it is the refinement of it. Sensitivity stops being a survival tool and starts becoming awareness. And this is why the shift is powerful. The empath no longer sees pain as proof that they must try harder. They see it as information. They stop asking, why does this always happen to me? And start asking, what is this teaching me about myself? That question marks the beginning of awakening, because when pain becomes insight and exhaustion becomes clarity, the empath steps onto the path of individuation. The breaking point, painful as it is, becomes the moment they stop surviving and start evolving. Shadow integration is the moment everything changes for the empath, because this is where softness meets strength and stops apologizing for it. Carl Jung believed that every human being carries a shadow, the hidden side of the personality that contains the traits we were taught to reject. Anger, selfishness, pride, jealousy, coldness, even the desire for control, these qualities are pushed down because they threaten the image we want to maintain. For the empath, this rejection runs even deeper. From an early age, they learned that being good meant being calm, patient, and endlessly understanding. So when anger appeared, they suppressed it. When they felt the urge to withdraw, they forced themselves to stay. When they sensed manipulation, they doubted their perception instead of trusting it. Over time, this created an imbalance. They developed light without weight, compassion without boundaries, kindness without protection. And Jung warned that this kind of imbalance prevents wholeness. The Sophia Shift begins when the empath stops denying their anger. Not exploding with it, not weaponizing it, but acknowledging it. They realize that anger is not the opposite of empathy, it is a signal that something matters. It is a boundary trying to form. For years, they may have believed that feeling anger made them less spiritual, less evolved, less kind. But suppressing it only made it leak out in quiet resentment, exhaustion, or passive withdrawal. When they finally allow themselves to feel it fully, something surprising happens. The anger does not destroy them. It clarifies them. It shows them where they have been overgiving. It reveals where they tolerated disrespect. It exposes where they abandoned their own needs to maintain peace. This realization is uncomfortable because it challenges their identity. If they are not endlessly patient, who are they? This is where shadow integration deepens. The empath begins to accept their capacity for traits they once judged in others. They admit that they can be cold when necessary, They recognize that they can walk away without explaining themselves. They see that they are capable of strategic silence, not as manipulation, but as self-control. Before this shift, silence felt like rejection, so they filled every gap with reassurance. After this shift, silence becomes powerful. They no longer rush to defend themselves against misunderstandings. They no longer chase closure from people who thrive on confusion. They observe, they measure. They choose their response carefully. This does not mean they lose their warmth. It means their warmth is no longer automatic. Jung believed that integrating the shadow is essential for individuation, the process of becoming whole. Without integration, a person remains divided, overly identified with their good qualities while unconsciously driven by the rejected parts. For the empath, failing to integrate the shadow often results in being easily manipulated. Because when you refuse to see your own capacity for control, you fail to recognize it in others. When you deny your own hidden anger, you are shocked by someone else's aggression. When you believe you would never set a boundary firmly, you assume others are not calculating either. But once the empath acknowledges their full range, their perception sharpens. They stop projecting innocence onto everyone. They stop assuming good intentions without evidence. They see people as complex, capable of both light and darkness, just like themselves. This is the birth of what some call the dangerous empath. Not dangerous in a cruel or destructive way, but dangerous in the sense that they can no longer be easily controlled. They are no longer afraid of being misunderstood. They are no longer desperate to maintain an image of perfect kindness. If someone attempts to guilt them, they notice it. If someone tests their boundaries, they respond calmly but firmly. If someone tries to provoke them emotionally, they do not react impulsively. They have faced their own darkness, so they are not intimidated by anyone else's. This inner stability changes their energy. People sense it. The empath, who once felt open and endlessly accommodating, now feels grounded and selective. They also stop fearing their own power. Before shadow integration, power felt dangerous. It felt like something only aggressive people had. The empath associated power with dominance or control, so they avoided it. But real power in Jungian terms comes from integration. It comes from knowing you are capable of harm but choosing restraint. It comes from understanding your emotional depth but not drowning in it. It comes from having boundaries that do not require anger to enforce. When the empath accepts this, they no longer shrink themselves to appear harmless. They no longer dilute their truth to stay likable. They speak directly when necessary, and they withdraw when respect is absent. An empath who integrates their shadow cannot be easily manipulated, because manipulation depends on blind spot. It depends on guilt, fear, and the need for approval. Once those vulnerabilities are examined and understood, they lose their grip. The empath still feels deeply, still cares, still understands others with precision. But now, their empathy is balanced with discernment. Their compassion is paired with strength. They are no longer divided between being kind and being powerful. They are both, and that integration is what makes them whole. Emotional intelligence becomes emotional strategy at the exact moment the empath stops living on emotional autopilot. Before the shift, they absorb emotions without filtering them. They walk into a room and immediately feel the tension, the unspoken conflict, the subtle disappointment in someone's tone. They do not just notice it, they internalize it. If someone is anxious, they feel anxious. If someone is upset, they feel responsible. Their nervous system reacts before their mind has time to evaluate. This ability makes them deeply perceptive, but it also makes them vulnerable. They mistake emotional absorption for connection. They believe that feeling everything proves closeness. Over time, this constant absorption becomes heavy. They carry moods that are not theirs. They try to fix problems that were never assigned to them. They respond to every emotional signal as if it requires action. And because they react quickly, others learn that they can easily access them, influence them, even redirect them. After the shift, something changes. The empath still senses emotions instantly, but instead of absorbing them, they pause and analyze them. The feeling no longer rushes straight into their identity. It stops at awareness. They begin asking quiet questions inside their mind. What am I feeling right now? Is this mine or is this coming from someone else? What is actually happening beneath the surface? This pause is powerful. It creates space between stimulus and response. Instead of drowning in emotional waves, they observe them like a skilled reader studying a complex text. Emotional intelligence transforms into something more structured, more intentional. It becomes emotional strategy. Reading intentions behind words becomes almost second nature. Before the shift, they focused mostly on what was said. After the shift, they pay attention to how it is said, when it is said, and what is avoided. They notice inconsistencies between language and behavior. They hear the hesitation in a voice that signals doubt. They recognize when flattery feels excessive or when criticism feels designed to provoke. This does not make them suspicious of everyone, it makes them attentive. They no longer take statements at face value when the emotional tone contradicts them. Their empathy sharpens into discernment. They understand that words can be chosen carefully, but energy is harder to disguise. They also sense energy shifts instantly, but now they treat those shifts as information, not instructions. If someone's mood suddenly changes, they do not rush to fix it. They observe. If tension rises during a conversation, they assess whether engagement will bring clarity or escalate conflict. If someone attempts to project guilt or pressure onto them, they feel it, but they do not automatically accept it. This is where the real evolution happens. The empath begins to choose when to engage and when to withdraw. Before the shift, withdrawal felt like rejection or failure. Now it feels like wisdom. They understand that not every emotional situation deserves their involvement. Some conflicts resolve themselves without interference. Some people learn only when they are not rescued. Choosing when to engage becomes a quiet form of power. They respond instead of reacting. If a conversation is respectful and open, they lean in fully, offering depth and insight. If it becomes manipulative or circular, they step back without drama. They no longer argue to prove their point. They no longer over-explain to defend their boundaries. Silence, once uncomfortable, becomes a strategic tool. It allows others to reveal more about themselves. It prevents unnecessary escalation. It protects emotional energy. This shift does not mean they stop caring. It means they stop overextending. Empathy becoming discernment is the key transformation. Discernment is not coldness, it is clarity. It is the ability to differentiate between genuine vulnerability and emotional manipulation. It is recognizing when someone is seeking support versus when someone is seeking control. Before the shift, the empath might have felt guilty for stepping back. After the shift, they understand that constant availability does not equal loyalty. They realize that healthy relationships do not require emotional sacrifice as proof of love. This understanding changes the quality of their connections. They attract fewer chaotic interactions because they no longer feed them with reactive energy. There is also a deeper internal change. The empath becomes less afraid of emotional intensity. Because they are no longer absorbing everything blindly, they feel more stable. Other people's moods do not dictate their state as easily. They can sit in a room filled with tension and remain centered. They can listen to someone vent without taking on the emotional weight. This steadiness surprises people who knew them before. The same person who once rushed to smooth conflict now listens calmly. The same person who once apologized quickly now evaluates whether an apology is even necessary. This evolution is subtle but profound. Emotional intelligence, once purely reactive and compassionate, becomes structured and intentional. The empath still understands deeply, still feels accurately, still connects intuitively. But now there is a filter, there is choice, there is timing. They no longer confuse access with intimacy or intensity with truth. They understand that every emotion carries information, but not every emotion deserves a response. And in that understanding, empathy matures into discernment, steady, precise, and quietly powerful. The death of the rescuer identity is one of the most painful and transformative moments in an empath's evolution, because for many of them, saving others was never just a behavior, it was their identity. From a young age, they learned to step in, calm chaos, offer advice, and carry emotional weight that did not belong to them. They became the stable one in unstable situations, the listener in loud environments, the healer in broken systems. Over time, this role gave them meaning. It made them feel valuable, needed, even irreplaceable. When someone was struggling, they felt a quiet sense of purpose. When someone depended on them, they felt secure in their place. The rescuer identity wrapped itself around their personality so tightly that it began to define who they believed they were. Without someone to fix who were they, many empaths are not consciously aware of this attachment. They simply believe they are kind. They believe they are being supportive, and often they truly are. But beneath that generosity can exist a subtle addiction, the need to be needed. Being the rescuer protects them from facing their own emptiness, their own unanswered questions, their own unresolved pain. As long as someone else requires their attention, they do not have to sit with themselves. As long as they are solving someone else's crisis, they do not have to confront their own. This dynamic can feel noble on the surface, but it quietly prevents growth. Carl Jung spoke about individuation as the process of becoming whole, and wholeness requires separation. It requires stepping out of roles that once defined us. It demands that we stop identifying only with the persona we built for survival. The Sophia Shift forces a difficult question into the empath's mind. Who am I if I stop rescuing everyone? This question can feel destabilizing. If their worth has always been measured by how much they give, stepping back feels almost wrong. It may even trigger guilt. They might worry that they are becoming selfish or cold. But the truth is deeper than that. When they stop rescuing, they are not abandoning compassion, they are redefining it. They begin to understand that constantly fixing others can actually prevent those people from growing. When someone is always saved, they never learn to stand on their own. When someone is always comforted without accountability, they never confront their own patterns. The empath begins to see that rescue can sometimes be control in disguise, control over being indispensable. So they stop fixing. Not suddenly, not harshly, but intentionally. When someone brings a problem, they listen without immediately offering solutions. When someone complains about the same issue repeatedly, they resist the urge to step in and repair it. They allow silence where advice once rushed in. They allow discomfort where reassurance once filled the space. And in that pause, something shifts internally. They start observing instead of absorbing. They notice patterns more clearly. They see who takes responsibility and who avoids it. They see who values their support and who simply expects it. This observation creates emotional distance, and that distance feels unfamiliar. This is the moment when people around them begin to react. Friends may say, "You've changed." Partners may feel less catered to. Family members may sense that the empath is no longer as available as before. The word changed is often not a compliment in this context. It carries disappointment, sometimes even accusation. But what has truly changed is not their heart, it is their boundaries. The empath no longer feels compelled to earn love through service. They no longer believe that their role is to carry everyone else's emotional weight. And for those who benefited from the old dynamic, this new version feels distant. That distance, however, is not rejection, it is clarity. It is the space required for individuation. Jung believed that to become whole, a person must separate from collective expectations and discover their authentic self. For the empath, that means discovering who they are outside the rescuer role. It means developing interests, desires, and boundaries that are not built around someone else's needs. It means allowing others to struggle without stepping in immediately. It means tolerating the discomfort of watching someone solve their own problems. This is not indifference, it is respect. Respect for the other person's capacity to grow, and respect for their own limited energy. As they move deeper into this shift, the empath begins to experience relationships differently. Connections become more balanced. Conversations feel less draining. There is more mutual exchange, less emotional dependency. They no longer measure their value by how much they sacrifice. Instead, they measure it by how honest they are with themselves. And while some relationships may fall away, the ones that remain are often healthier and more authentic. The death of the rescuer identity is not the death of empathy. It is the rebirth of it in a stronger form. The empath still cares deeply. They still understand pain, but they no longer see themselves as responsible for eliminating it in everyone else. They understand that growth sometimes requires struggle, and love sometimes requires stepping back. When people call them changed, they are right. The empath has changed. They are no longer defined by who they save. They are defined by who they are becoming. The Sophia empath feels threatening not because they are aggressive, but because they are no longer transparent in the way they used to be. Before the shift, they were open books. They overshared their feelings, explained their motives, clarified their intentions, and reassured others constantly. Their openness made people comfortable. It made them predictable. You always knew where you stood with them because they told you. But after the shift, something changes. They become more private, not secretive in a deceptive way, but selective. They understand that not everyone deserves full access to their inner world. They speak with intention instead of impulse. They listen more than they reveal. And for people who are used to easy emotional access, this new restraint feels unsettling. They also stop over-explaining their boundaries. In the past, when they said no, it came with a long paragraph of justification. They softened it, decorated it, made sure the other person felt comfortable with it. They carried the emotional burden of the refusal. Now, the boundary is simple, calm, clear. I'm not available for that. That doesn't work for me. There is no excessive apology attached to it. No dramatic tone. Just steadiness. This steadiness can feel intimidating to someone who relies on guilt or pressure to get their way. When a person cannot find emotional leverage, they often interpret that as distance or coldness. But what they are actually encountering is self-respect. The Sophia empath also stops reacting emotionally to manipulation. This is where the psychological tension becomes obvious. Manipulation often depends on triggering a response: guilt, fear, urgency, defensiveness. Before the shift, the empath might have reacted quickly, trying to defend themselves or repair the tension. Now, they pause, they notice the subtle blame hidden inside a compliment. They detect the passive, aggressive tone beneath polite words. They sense when someone is testing their limits. But instead of reacting, they remain composed. They do not raise their voice. They do not rush to justify themselves. They simply respond with clarity or, in some cases, with silence. That lack of reaction disrupts the manipulator's strategy. It removes the emotional reward. Another reason they feel threatening is their ability to mirror people calmly. When someone projects negativity, they do not absorb it anymore. They reflect it back in a controlled way. If someone speaks with disrespect, the empath's tone becomes firm. If someone tries to twist facts, the empath calmly repeats the truth without escalation. This mirroring is not revenge, it is alignment. They no longer bend to maintain harmony. They match the energy in a grounded way. And for people who are not used to being confronted with their own behavior, this feels exposing. It feels like standing in front of a clear mirror that does not distort or soften the reflection. Unaware individuals often feel exposed around a Sophia empath because the empath sees patterns quickly. They notice inconsistencies between words and actions. They recognize when someone is seeking validation rather than connection. They sense insecurity hidden behind arrogance. And because they are no longer seeking approval, they do not pretend not to see it. They may not call it out directly every time, but their energy shifts. They become less engaged, less impressed, less easily influenced. That subtle withdrawal communicates awareness. People who depend on illusion or performance begin to feel uncomfortable. The core reason they are perceived as dangerous is simple: they see clearly, and they are no longer desperate to be liked. Approval once played a significant role in the empath's behavior. It influenced how much they gave, how much they tolerated, and how much they explained. When that need fades, their presence changes. They no longer chase connection. They allow it. They no longer argue to prove their goodness. They let their actions speak. This quiet confidence can feel powerful, even intimidating. To someone who is still operating from insecurity, it is important to understand that this perceived threat is not rooted in cruelty. The Sophia empath is not trying to dominate or control. They are simply integrated. They have accepted both their warmth and their strength. They can offer compassion without surrendering discernment. They can care without collapsing their boundaries. And because they are no longer divided internally, their external presence feels solid. People sense that they cannot easily be swayed by flattery, guilt, or emotional chaos. This solidity changes the dynamic in every room they enter. Conversations become more honest or shorter. Games lose their effect. Drama finds no fuel. Some people will step up and meet this new level of clarity with maturity. Others will step away, uncomfortable with the reflection. Either response confirms the shift. The Sophia empath does not need to announce their transformation. It is felt. They are no longer threatening because they are reactive. They are threatening because they are aware. And awareness, when combined with self-respect, is a form of quiet power that unsettles anyone who is not ready to face themselves. Most empaths never make the Sophia shift, not because they lack sensitivity or intelligence, but because the journey requires a level of honesty and courage that feels terrifying. It is not an external obstacle that prevents them from evolving. It is the internal resistance to facing themselves fully. One of the strongest barriers is the fear of being alone. Many empaths have learned, often from childhood, that their worth is tied to connection. They fear rejection, abandonment, and isolation. The thought of stepping back from relationships, even toxic or draining ones, triggers anxiety. They have spent so long giving that being alone feels like a threat to their identity. They worry, if I stop rescuing, who will like me? This fear keeps them stuck in cycles of over-giving, over-explaining, and over-accommodating, even when it erodes their sense of self. Another major barrier is guilt about saying no. For the empath, refusal has always carried a heavy emotional cost. Saying no triggers self-criticism, shame, and worry about how others will perceive them. They are conditioned to believe that kindness is synonymous with compliance and that refusal equals selfishness. This makes boundary setting feel like rebellion. They apologize excessively, explain endlessly, and sometimes override their own needs to avoid conflict. Until they can sit with the discomfort of saying no without guilt, the Sophia shift cannot occur. Trauma bonding also plays a critical role in keeping empaths from evolving. Many empaths have been in relationships where patterns of pain and rescue repeated themselves for years. They became addicted to the emotional highs of fixing or being needed, even when those relationships were harmful. This creates an unconscious loop where empathy is used as a survival strategy rather than a conscious choice. The moment the empath tries to step away from these patterns, anxiety rises. The familiar discomfort of letting go feels unbearable, so they cling to old dynamics that keep them small. Addiction to validation is another hidden obstacle. Before the Sophia shift, empaths often seek approval as proof of their worth. Compliments, gratitude, recognition, and even dependence from others reinforce their self-esteem. This need for external validation makes them reactive rather than centered. They give more than they intend, apologize too quickly, and compromise endlessly to maintain the perception of being good. The moment they stop seeking approval, their energy changes. People sense the shift. This is both liberating and frightening, and many empaths resist because of the uncertainty it brings. Achieving the Sophia Shift requires radical self-honesty. It demands that the empath look closely at their motives, behaviors, and fears without judgment. They must acknowledge where they have overgiven, where they have avoided confrontation, and where they have sacrificed themselves to maintain appearances. This kind of honesty is uncomfortable because it strips away illusions about identity. It forces the empath to see the ways they have protected themselves while simultaneously holding themselves back. It is a confrontation with their own shadows and insecurities that not everyone is willing to face. The shift also requires letting relationships fall away. People who thrived on the old patterns of overgiving, approval seeking, and rescuing will resist change, sometimes subtly and sometimes openly. This can be painful, because the empath has invested emotionally in these connections for years. But stepping into the Sophia Shift often means watching some people leave, not out of malice, but because the dynamics that kept them connected no longer exist. This is not rejection, it is natural evolution. True growth often requires pruning, creating space for healthier, more balanced connections. Embracing solitude is another essential step. The Sophia Shift is not about isolation for its own sake, but about learning to rely on oneself emotionally, spiritually, and mentally. Solitude allows the empath to process feelings without interference, to examine patterns, to observe themselves without distraction. It creates a foundation of inner strength that cannot be built while constantly catering to external needs. Solitude teaches discernment, patience, and self-respect, qualities essential for someone stepping into the full power of their empathy. The reason most empaths never make the Sophia Shift is that it is uncomfortable, risky, and requires letting go of familiar emotional anchors. It asks them to face themselves with radical honesty, step back from relationships that no longer serve them, and embrace a level of solitude that feels foreign at first. The shift demands that they stop protecting the version of themselves that keeps them small and start stepping into a version that is whole, integrated, and aware. It is not an easy path, and it is not meant for everyone. So the final question that defines this journey is this: are you truly evolving, or are you still protecting the version of yourself that keeps you small? This question is not rhetorical. It is the mirror that every empath must look into if they hope to reach the Sophia Shift. It asks them to examine their fear, their patterns, and their attachments, and to consider whether they are willing to risk discomfort for the sake of transformation. Only those who dare to confront these truths can step fully into the stage where empathy becomes power, discernment, and clarity.